Roland Emmerich's Midway arrived in November 2019 as a modern, effects-forward retelling of one of the most consequential naval battles of World War II. The film sets out to dramatize the sequence of events from Pearl Harbor through the decisive carrier battle centered on Midway Atoll in June 1942. Emmerich, who has made his career on large-scale disaster and spectacle pictures, approached Midway as both a tribute to service members and as a blockbuster intended to put audiences in the cockpits, radios rooms, and flag bridges where the fate of the Pacific was decided. The movie's sheer scope and patriotic aim are unmistakable. It's an ensemble war epic that tries to balance human stories with cataclysmic action. From the outset, Midway announces its priorities. It foregrounds personal threads: the pilot Dick Best Ed Skrein, intelligence officer Edwin T. Layton Patrick Wilson, and commanders like Admiral Chester W. Nimitz Woody Harrelson and Vice Admiral William Bull Halsey Dennis Quaid, while intercutting them with large aerial battles and carrier warfare choreography. The casting is intentionally ensemble. Alongside Skrein and Wilson, the film populates its decks with familiar faces: Luke Evans, Aaron Eckhart, Mandy Moore, Nick Jonas, Darren Criss, among others, to give viewers multiple access points into the story. That casting in the film's production background, a roughly $100 million budget, assembled in part via independent financing and Chinese equity, shaped both the film's ambitions and the marketplace pressures it faced. Visually, Midway is the film at its strongest. Emmerich, with veteran cinematography and visual effects teams, stages aerial and naval engagements with visceral clarity. Dogfights are cut to maximize kinetic energy. Camera placements, rapid edits, and sound design put audiences into the cramped, shaking cockpits. The movie uses digital reconstruction to create carrier decks, torpedo runs, and the iconic moments of the battle: hits, explosions, and the burning hulks of ships. For viewers who want spectacle, these sequences deliver. They feel immediate, dangerous, and often overwhelming in a way that practical effects alone might struggle to match. Critics and many audience members agreed that the film's production values and action sequences were among its most successful elements. But spectacle is not a substitute for narrative clarity, and here the film's reception exposes a tension that runs through Midway. The film is designed as both a crowd-pleasing popcorn epic and a responsible historical retelling. Critics were mixed, arguing that the script's workmanlike plotting and frequent scene jumps left little room for deeper characterization or thematic layering. Many reviews singled out the screenplay, written by Wes Took and shaped in production with input from naval historians, as serviceable but emotionally shallow, with characters who sometimes act as signposts rather than fully rounded people. That gap between spectacle and emotional depth accounts for a lot of the disconnect between critics and general audiences. On Rotten Tomatoes, for example, critics' consensus landed in the mixed zone, while audience responses were far more enthusiastic. The film's treatment of history is another central conversation. Emmerich and his team made it clear they consulted the Naval History and Heritage Command and other historians during development and production, an effort intended to lend authenticity to both the events and the jargon. The Department of Defense Navy involvement isn't merely ceremonial. Historians and Navy assets provided technical advising and access that helped shape uniforms, procedures, and certain operational details. Those consultations helped Midway avoid some of the most egregious errors that often plague historical action films, and they enabled sequences, the carrier briefings, radio traffic, and damage control scenes to feel grounded in shipboard reality. Still, consulting with official historians doesn't mean artistic choices disappear. The filmmakers still compressed timelines, conflated characters, and simplified complex operational decisions in service of a 2-hour-plus cinematic arc. One of the recurring criticisms leveled at Midway concerns the balance of myth and revision. The Battle of Midway has accrued a set of popular myths: heroic dive bomber attacks that caused a chain reaction of carrier defeats, the primacy of a single decisive moment, and tidy cause and effect linking of code-breaking to tactical victory that are convenient for dramatization. Modern scholarship complicates that narrative. Books like Shattered Sword and articles by naval historians argue for a more nuanced interplay of luck, tactical improvisation, logistics, and intelligence. Emmerich's film leans into some of the classic frames, emphasizing individual heroism and clear, decisive blows, while also nodding to the intelligence triumph represented by Joe Rochefort and the cryptanalysis team. In practice, the movie presents intelligence work, Layton's role, the breaking of JN-25 storyline, as integral, but not at the level of documentary subtlety. It's a dramatic simplification, not a comprehensive military history. Where the movie scores in public affection is in its honoring of individual courage and sacrifice. Crowd and veteran audiences responded positively to the focus on men who flew at dawn into flak and fighters, the crews who fought fires in engine rooms, and the officers who had to make irreversible decisions minutes before catastrophe. There's an emotional economy to scenes where surviving pilots return to burning carriers or where commanders absorb the human cost of victory. These moments are often short, plainly delivered, and designed to resonate. They acknowledge loss without becoming morose, and they root the spectacle in the people who bore it. For many viewers, that emotional orientation mattered more than the film's structural or analytic shortcomings. Commercially, Midway had a complicated trajectory. It opened at the top of the box office in its debut weekend, but ultimately underperformed relative to its budget, closing with a worldwide gross that left it short of clear profitability in theatrical terms. Some analysts called it a box office bomb, given the roughly $100 million production budget and the modest domestic take. International pre-sales and Chinese financing mitigated some of the risk, but the film's marketplace problem underscores a wider trend. Prestige or historically themed tentpoles without franchise backing face an uphill battle in a market dominated by superheroes and established IP. The interplay between production scale and distribution realities is a significant part of Midway's post-release story. The film did well, with certain audience segments and streaming windows later on, but it did not become the theatrical blockbuster that its budget and scope implied. Critically, the split between professional critics and general viewers is one of the more interesting aspects of Midway's afterlife. While critics often faulted the film for its thin character beats and sometimes heavy-handed exposition, audience scores were frequently much higher. This divergence is instructive. It suggests that Midway met its primary goal for many viewers: to immerse and to honor, even if it didn't satisfy critics looking for either narrative innovation or deeper thematic interrogation. The film's reception thus raises questions about what viewers expect from historical cinema, accuracy and nuance, or visceral engagement and tribute. In truth, both expectations are valid. The film simply privileges the latter. From a filmmaking craft perspective, there's a lot to commend in the movie's technical design, production design, costumes, sound mixing, and VFX all collaborate to create a believable wartime world. The film relies on a palette of grays, rusted metal, and saturated explosions, and it uses practical set pieces combined with digital extensions to suggest scale. The sound design, the scream of a Zero's engine, the thump of a carrier catapult, the distant rumble of an explosion, plays into the film's attempt to pull viewers into a sensory experience of naval aviation. In many ways, the production team succeeded in making the Pacific Theater feel like a place with its own physical laws and dangers. These are the craft achievements that many reviews singled out, even while they criticized narrative choices. There are also moments where the film's compression of events overstretches plausibility. Condensing months of strategic movement and hundreds of participants into a single cinematic through line inevitably sacrifices nuance. Secondary characters are introduced and then sacrificed in quick succession, sometimes to emotionally impact the audience, and sometimes just to populate the cost of battle. For viewers with prior knowledge of the campaign, these shorthand choices can feel like missed opportunities to explore lesser-known yet fascinating threads: the Japanese operational planning, the interplay between different carrier task forces, or the prolonged human aftermath for survivors. For newcomers, the film can be a strong primer, but it will likely prompt further reading for those curious about the real story. What is the takeaway then for a modern viewer? Midway is not a definitive documentary. It's not trying to be. It is, instead, a Hollywood retelling that uses contemporary cinematic tools to re-energize a foundational historical narrative. If you watch Midway with an appetite for spectacle, a respect for the men portrayed, and an understanding that history has been compressed and dramatized, you will find it rewarding. If you approach it expecting a detailed operational history or nuanced moral inquiry into war, you may feel shortchanged. The film sits squarely in the tradition of large-scale American war pictures that prioritize immediacy and emotional identification. Think of how films like Tora, or the better-remembered segments of Saving Private Ryan blend the human and the operational. Midway aims for the same intersection, but takes a clearer tilt towards cinematic spectacle and public commemoration. Finally, the film's cultural afterlife is interesting. Midway has become a go-to recommendation for general audiences seeking an entry point into the battle. It has spawned renewed interest in the historical literature, documentaries, and oral histories of the campaign. For content creators, educators, and history enthusiasts, the movie functions as a launchpad. Watch the film, then read the primary sources and modern historiography to understand the fuller picture. Emmerich's Midway may not settle debates about who did what or why, but it does what many mainstream historical films aim to do. It makes history visible, immediate, and felt, and it encourages viewers to learn more.